The summer rain poured down on Hell's Kitchen as if wanting to wash away all the sins clinging to the old brick walls. Each droplet pitter-pattered on the tin roofs, blending with the distant car horns and the gurgling of drain pipes, creating a chaotic symphony characteristic of this neighborhood. But for Peter Parker, tonight was anything but romantic. He swung through the narrow gap between two buildings, his red and blue suit soaked with rain, clinging to his toned physique. His fingers grazed his waist, firing a thin but durable strand of web that pulled him soaring into the air. His target was an abandoned warehouse on the lower floor, where an Oscorp tech smuggling ring had just been busted. But as he landed as light as a cat on a broken window frame, something felt off. The smell of blood, very faint but unmistakable amidst the rain. Peter frowned, the lenses on his suit automatically adjusting their focus, scanning the pitch-black room. In the corner, a man lay curled up. It was Jimmy Splitlip, a petty smuggler, but a key witness Peter had convinced to cooperate with the police just this morning. Now, he was dying. Peter rushed over, kneeling to check. A weak heartbeat. On his chest was a strange wound, not caused by a knife or a bullet, but as if a high-tension cord had cut into the flesh, leaving mesh-like bruises. A chill ran down Spider-Man's spine. That material, it looked like his webbing. Impossible, Peter whispered, his voice catching in his throat. I haven't even been here tonight. Before he could think further, his spider sense screamed in his mind. A familiar tingling sensation shot through the back of his neck. Not a punch, not a bullet. Something tore through the air, lunging from the left. Whiz! By reflex, Peter arched backward, his waist bending at an almost non-physical angle. A bright red metal baton, attached to a cable, swept through the space where his head had just been, smashing an old machine into 100 pieces. If the blow had landed, his skull might have been crushed. Daredevil! Peter shouted, jumping back 3 steps, hands raised in defense. From the high rafters, a dark figure descended silently. The deep red suit almost blended into the shadows of the warehouse, with only the blank white demonic eyes on the mask standing out. Matt Murdock stood there, his body coiled like a steel spring, teeth bared. The rage radiating from him was so intense that Peter could feel it even from 3 meters away. Spider-Man. Daredevil's voice wasn't loud, but cold and dangerous as a razor blade. I warned you to stay out of my kitchen. But you dared to. Heard an innocent, Matt, listen, it wasn't me. Peter raised his hands, trying to de-escalate. I just got here. Someone framed me. What caused those wounds wasn't my webbing. But Daredevil wasn't listening. In Matt Murdock's world, woven from sound, scent, and touch, the evidence was too clear. He heard Spider-Man's heartbeat, a heartbeat incredibly steady, even while lying, but the smell of synthetic polymer adhesive on the victim's wound. It matched exactly the scent from the web shooters on Spider-Man's wrist. To Daredevil, it was undeniable proof. The man standing before him was a cold-blooded criminal. You won't get a chance to explain, Daredevil roared, lunging like a storm. The battle began. Daredevil didn't give Spider-Man a single second to breathe. He closed in relentlessly, using masterful close-quarters combat and the incredible strength of a top-tier martial artist. The billy club in his hand seemed alive, serving as an offensive weapon, a grappling hook, and a tool for suppression. Every time Peter tried to raise his hand to fire a web and gain distance or restrain his opponent, the baton would strike, slamming into the web shooters on his wrists and throwing off his aim. Thud! A roundhouse kick swept into Peter's ribs. He blocked it with his forearm, but the force was so great it sent him sliding across the wet cement floor. Hey, calm down. That old man is still alive. We need to call an ambulance. Shut up. Daredevil roared, hurling his baton forward. It ricocheted off the wall, bouncing back, aimed straight for the back of Peter's neck. Spider-Man ducked, feeling the rush of air graze his head, but it was only a feint. Daredevil was already right in front of him, throwing a straight punch at his face. Peter caught the fist, his glove tightened, holding Daredevil's hand mid-air. Matt, please, snap out of it. You're a lawyer, at least give the defendant a trial. The trial is over. Daredevil growled, twisting his wrist to break the grip easily while simultaneously driving a knee into Peter's stomach. Peter recoiled, clutching his stomach. He didn't want to fight back. Matt Murdock wasn't a bad guy. He was a friend, or at least a former ally. But the rage and absolute confidence in his senses had turned Daredevil into an unstoppable machine of destruction. Fighting here, in this cramped and noisy space, was a disadvantage for Peter. He needed space. He needed time. And above all, he needed the sound of the rain to stop. If you want to play tag, Peter coughed, springing backward onto the rafters. then we'll play. He zipped through the broken window, plunging out into the rain toward the skyscrapers. Behind him, he heard the tension of a cable and the sound of boots kicking off the walls. Daredevil was in pursuit, and he was faster than death itself. The chase across the rooftops of Hell's Kitchen that night was like a dance of death. Spider-Man, the master of web swinging and aerial acrobatics, vaulted through the streets at terrifying speed, but he couldn't shake Daredevil. Unlike other enemies, Matt Murdock didn't need to see him. He felt him. The whistling wind as Spider-Man cut through the air, the thwip of the web shooters, even the sound of Peter's heart beating in his chest, it all painted a vivid three-dimensional map in Daredevil's blind mind. The heavier the rain fell, the clearer Matt's world became, as every raindrop hitting Peter acted as a tracking signal. "This isn't good at all," Peter muttered, swinging past a flagpole and landing on the roof of an old laundromat. As soon as he touched down, Daredevil's baton pinned exactly where he was expected to land, forcing Peter to roll just to avoid it in time. "He knows what I'm going to do before I even do it." Peter realized the problem was the rhythm. Every fighter has a rhythm, how they breathe, how they shift their center of gravity, and how their muscles contract before a strike. Daredevil wasn't seeing the future. He was reading his opponent's body rhythm. Just as Peter thought about firing a web from his left wrist, his left shoulder dropped slightly and his triceps contracted, and Matt heard it all in a millisecond. This was why he couldn't counter. Every direct attack, whether a punch, kick, or web shot, was read and ruthlessly countered. Spider-Man's superior strength became useless against an opponent who never stood still. Peter slipped on the slick tin roof and nearly fell, and Daredevil was already there, throwing a straight kick to the face. Peter raised his arms to block, but the force of the kick was so powerful it sent him flying backward, hitting his back against a brick chimney and shattering a section of the wall. "You can't run away, Spider-Man," Daredevil growled, approaching as rain lashed down on his red mask. "You can't hide from justice." "Justice?" Peter snapped back, his voice ringing with anger for the first time. "You're blinded to the truth. Someone copied my webs. I came here to help Jimmy, not to kill him." "Lies," Daredevil shouted. But Peter noticed a split second of hesitation in his movement, tiny but real. Matt Murdock, the lawyer, knew there had to be a motive, but rage had overwhelmed reason. Peter knew he had no other choice. He couldn't beat Matt in an open fight and needed to change the rules. He needed a place without rain, where he could control the environment. The eyes on his mask narrowed as Peter quickly scanned the area, spotting an abandoned 5-story building with boarded-up windows. "Perfect. Follow me if you dare, blind devil," Peter taunted, intentionally provoking his opponent. He fired a web at the building's iron door, yanked it open, and dove into the darkness, and Daredevil plunged in after him without hesitation. Inside the building, the world was completely different. The sound of the rain was blocked by thick walls, reduced to a vague hum, and the air was still and dusty. This was Peter's arena, but Daredevil remained confident. Without the rain to drown it out, he could hear even clearer Spider-Man's pounding heart, his heavy breathing, and the sound of water dripping from his soaked suit onto the rotten wooden floor. Drip, drip, drip. Nowhere left to run, Daredevil slowly stepped into the central hall, a large room with a crumbling spiral staircase, twirling his baton in his hand. A nice place to die. "I don't intend to run anymore," Peter's voice echoed from all directions. He was moving, but extremely slowly and steadily, trying not to create sudden changes in his biorhythm so Matt couldn't read his intentions. "I just wanted to show you how strong you are when you take away someone else's sight. But what if I take away your hearing?" Daredevil froze in a flicker of confusion, then mockery. "You can't, really?" Peter replied, standing still on a rafter above Daredevil's head. "I'm a scientist, Matt. I spent the last 5 minutes not just running, but analyzing the frequencies you use. You hear the world through echoes, like a bat. But what if I scream loud enough in your ear, or worse, cancel out the sound entirely?" Without waiting for a reaction, Peter acted. He raised both hands high, not to fire webs at Daredevil, but at the entire ceiling and surrounding walls. Hundreds of thin, almost invisible web strands shot out, crisscrossing to form a massive network as dense as a cocoon that covered the whole room. These webs were fired with extreme tension, and Daredevil felt the change as the structure of the room suddenly became acoustically soft. Sound no longer bounced harshly off the brick walls but was absorbed and scattered by the elastic web layer, causing his world to blur like a water-smudged painting, though it was still enough to fight. Child's play. Daredevil roared, hurling his baton at where he thought Peter was standing, but Peter had already moved and landed on the floor 3 meters away. Then, Peter did something none of Daredevil's enemies had ever done. He turned on a homemade sound system built into his suit, but instead of ultrasound, he used white noise, a mix of all frequencies audible to the human ear, amplified to the max. A piercing sound, like thousands of TVs losing signal, tore through the space. It wasn't loud enough to destroy hearing, but it was an absolute wall of sound. For Daredevil, whose hearing was dozens of times more sensitive than a normal human's, the sensory chaos was devastating. He could no longer hear anything. Spider-Man's heartbeat, the wind, footsteps, or the sound of web shots, all were swallowed by a sea of white noise. Arg! Daredevil collapsed, hands clutching his head as his baton dropped to the floor. He knelt, completely disoriented, feeling truly blind for the first time in years. His world was no longer a soundscape, but a void. He punched wildly at the air, hitting nothing, and then Peter turned off the white noise. The sudden silence was just as devastating. Daredevil panted, kneeling on the floor, his ears ringing intensely, unable to orient himself at all. He didn't know where his enemy was, where the walls were, or where the ceiling was. He was completely disarmed, with no chance to counterattack. In that stillness, a hand was gently placed on his shoulder. Matt flinched, trying to swing his arm, but his wrist was held firm. A voice spoke, so close that Matt could feel the breath. "Sorry about this, Matt." But it was the only way. Peter slowly removed Daredevil's mask. He wanted Matt to feel his sincerity through skin and voice things an echo couldn't convey. He leaned close to Matt's ear, whispering not excuses, but cold, hard facts. "I was in Queens at 9:00 p.m. tonight, saving a little girl from an apartment fire. There are at least 30 witnesses. Officer Yuri Watanabe processed the scene. My webbing dissolves after 2 hours, but the substance used to attack Jimmy was a permanent polymer. I've taken a sample. Someone stole my old web formula from the university lab. I think it's Mysterio, or the Chameleon. This was a trap to turn you into a weapon against me, and it almost worked." Every word was like a drop of cool water falling into the frantic desert of Matt's mind. He couldn't hear Peter's heartbeat over the ringing in his ears, but he could feel the tremor in his voice. It wasn't a tremor of fear, but of hurt and concern. No lie could produce such a subtle vibration at that frequency in the larynx, and the evidence, every timestamp, every name, every dry technical detail, was undeniable. Daredevil remained kneeling, motionless. His rage, once a blazing fire, was completely extinguished by the rain of truth. He had been manipulated. He, the embodiment of justice, had nearly become the executioner of an innocent man simply because of his overconfidence in his own senses. A long silence followed. Rain still fell outside, but inside the building, there was only the heavy breathing of 2 men. I almost killed you," Matt whispered, his voice hoarse and devoid of pride. For the first time, he spoke to Peter as a peer, not an enemy. "But you didn't," Peter replied, letting go of Matt's shoulder and sitting down on the floor to face his colleague. He removed his own mask, letting the cold, dusty air hit his tired but relieved face. "I know what it's like to have the whole world turn against you. It's terrifying. But you have to trust me, I would never harm an innocent person." Matt slowly raised his head. He still couldn't hear clearly, but he knew Peter was right there, unprotected and unmasked. This wasn't the stance of a victor mocking the defeated. It was the stance of a friend. Peter stood up and helped Matt to his feet. "Come on. Jimmy is still alive. We need to call an ambulance, and then we're going to find out together who is really behind this. I have a few ideas about a certain guy who loves illusions and smoke." Daredevil remained silent for a long moment, then nodded. He picked up his baton, but not to fight. He used it as a guide through the sonic darkness he was still experiencing. "Fine," Matt said, his voice regaining some composure, but carrying a newfound humility. "This time we do it your way, Parker." As they both stepped out of the ruined building, the rain began to subside. Faint yellow streetlights cast shadows of the 2 solitary figures in the heart of Hell's Kitchen. In this battle, no loser was left unconscious, and no bones were shattered. But there was a clear winner. Spider-Man had defeated Daredevil, not with fists, but with intellect and compassion. He had analyzed, adapted, and neutralized his opponent completely, leaving one of the planet's most fearsome street fighters unable to strike back. Yet Peter Parker's greatest victory that night wasn't taking down the man without fear. It was breaking through the wall of prejudice and rage within Matt Murdock. saving a witness's life, and more importantly, saving a friend's soul from the abyss of blind hatred. In a world of superheroes where strength is often defined by the capacity to destroy, Peter Parker demonstrated a strength even greater,